Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Smart Webinar series and today's webinar, Recruitment, Engagement, and Culture. You can't have one without the other.
Hi everybody. So in today's webinar, I'm going to give an overview of the current senior living labor market. I'm going to address the impact your culture can have on recruitment and retention, and also go over some best practices that can help support an engaged culture and drive your recruitment and retention efforts. And then I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Tommy Kummer, who's the HR leader for Commonwealth Assisted Living, who's going to share some of his insights into the process of transitioning Commonwealth into an employer of choice by integrating recruitment and retention into their culture. You will find handouts from today's presentation, which you can download by clicking on the document in the handout section in your control panel. So first of all, let's go over the current labor market. As an industry, we're constantly talking about the labor market, and not in a good way. And guess what? Yeah, it's that bad. So we know that we need 5 million direct care workers by 2020. So let's take a look at the numbers. By 2020, the number of individuals 65 and plus will grow to 56.4 million. That's only 4 years away. By 2050, this number is projected to more than double. We also know that it takes many different types of workers to run a senior living community, including medical care, food services, facility maintenance, and upkeep. And the average employee turnover rate for this industry has been reported to be between 30 and 45%. We also know that the senior living industry currently struggles today to find quality caregivers. So we're going to be competing for these 5 million direct care workers needed by 2020. So many communities get on the gerbil wheel of employee management, hiring, firing, performance reviews, disciplinary action, termination, and over and over and over again. In order to run a successful senior care community, you have to find a way to recruit the best associates, engage them so they're providing the best care for your residents, and then retain them. So let's talk about some of the ways we can get off the gerbil wheel. So there's some basics that need to be addressed. You can see from this chart the disparity between the median hourly wage for direct care workers versus other hourly occupations. So it's no surprise when someone leaves healthcare for a better paying, often physically and mentally easier job elsewhere. And this is especially evident in some of the tourist areas where summer help is needed and they're willing to pay for the summer help. This chart shows the median hourly wages for direct care workers from 2004 through 2014. And you can see that it's actually decreased from 2004. And we also know that 49%, so think about this, almost half of the direct care worker households, 49% live in households earning below 200% of the federal poverty level income, making them eligible for most state and federal public assistance programs. So most direct care workers are relying on some federal public assistance programs. 39% are on Medicaid and 33% receive food and nutrition assistance. So what can we do? So first of all, let's look at compensation. Are you offering livable wages that are competitive? If your staff are worrying about getting to their second job or paying the rent, they're not going to be engaged. You can check out the MIT Living Wage Calculator at www.livingwage.mit.edu, and it will give you specific living wage information broken down by county, and then based on different family situations. So, what's a living wage for someone who's single in that county? What's the living wage for someone with single and one children, or married and two children? Also, are your benefits affordable? How many of your line staff are taking advantage of your benefits? Do you offer consistent work schedules? And are there shift differentials? These all play a critical part in the decision making of a direct care worker in signing on with a company. So let's also look at opportunity. Do you offer education and training that goes beyond regulatory requirements and provides chances for employees to learn new skills? Do you provide opportunities to grow professionally? Do you have a educational scholarship program, or do you offer a career ladder for maybe someone that doesn't want to get a formal higher education, but still wants to learn and grow more and have the opportunity to do more within your community? And last of all, but certainly not least, is success. Have you set up your employees for success? So there's two keys, for setting up your employees for success. The first is making sure you have a culture of accountability and you provide clear expectations. Here's what you need to do to be successful, and we're going to hold you accountable. But oftentimes the next part is what we don't do well, is we don't always provide the resources and the coaching for them to meet those expectations. It's as simple as I was working in a community help as a consultant, and they were having trouble with housekeeping. They weren't meeting they weren't getting the rooms clean. So we sat down with the housekeepers and we found out that they actually didn't have a good vacuum cleaner. So you can set the expectations and you hold them accountable, but you also have to make sure that they have the resources to be able to be successful. All of these are going to impact your recruitment efforts. So let's look at some recruiting best practices. So everybody wants to sleep at night. You want to know you have the best staff caring for your residents. You want associates who are passionate, skilled, and invested. How do you find them, and how do they find you? How do you stand out as an employer of choice? So here's just some simple, recruiting best practices. First is offer incentives for employee referrals. If your employees are engaged and they enjoy working in your community and it's a great working environment, they're going to actually be some of your best recruiters. They're going to want to bring their friends in. Not many senior living companies do this, but it's important to have a dedicated career pages website. So I often like to look at recruitment and retention the same way that I look at bringing on new residents. The same focus you give to occupancy, you really should be putting into your recruitment efforts. A dedicated web page provides a platform to showcase your culture, your benefits, as well as job openings. And this actually helps to attract a higher quality candidate when you have that level of professionalism. Host open houses and job fairs. And this is one of my favorites. Dig a well before you're thirsty. Always be recruiting. We can't wait for an open position to be available before we start our search to fill it. I've seen communities that are always recruiting, and they'll bring great candidates on per diem to get them into the company, into the community, into the culture, and then give them greater hours as the needs arise. But you also always want to make sure your pipeline is full. And also, don't forget technology. There are applicant tracking systems, hiring assessment tools, skills and competency testing, and background check technology that can really help with your recruiting efforts. So let's dig down a little deeper and look at some culture-based recruiting best practices. So here are some ways to express your culture and values during the recruitment process. The first one is first impressions. Don't forget about first impressions. So not unlike a resident's first tour of a community, all interactions that the prospect has with the community give them insight into the culture. So you want to make sure you give the right impression. If an applicant has to wait a long time for the interview, isn't greeted appropriately, they're not going to feel good about working there. So what can you do to stand out? We're all going after the same applicants. There's a lot of noise in recruiting new talent, and many companies are fighting over the same talent. So what can you do different that makes you be front and center? And do you have that better and different story that you can tell to potential employees? Also, be creative when interviewing. Explore the different approaches to interviewing candidates. I've had communities that have developed a hiring committee with line staff involved with the interviews. I've also worked with another community that asked residents and families to interview candidates. And they found that was not only successful in getting great employees, but it also increased resident engagement. It made the resident families feel really good about being part of that process, and it went over very well. Skills and competency. So every time a resident comes in to tour a community, they hear, we have the best staff. Our staff is absolutely the best. But we have to be able to define what is it that makes them the best. So you want to make sure that when you bring in new hires that they have the skills and competency to provide the level of quality care that is part of your values and part of your mission statement. And hiring for heart. How do you find candidates that are not task focused, especially direct care workers? That's how they're trained, to be very task focused. But you want staff that are resident focused. So in the handout section, you can actually download the Hiring for Heart interview guide from the control panel. And it breaks down the interview process, including questions to ask that will give you insight into finding kind of the best fit for your community. So let's talk a little bit about engagement. So we know that only 30% of employees are engaged at work. And we also know that about 52% are present, so they show up, but they're not really engaged. And then we also know that a full 18% are actively disengaged or even worse. So how can we use our culture to drive engagement? The first thing you should look at is your onboarding and orientation program. You've hired great talent, you've put in the time, you've put in the effort to make sure you're getting the best fit for your community, and now you want to keep them. So even great associates can feel uninspired by their work and search for something new. So in your onboarding and orientation, you want to make that first impression. Do you have new hires sit in a conference room filling out mountains of paperwork? Do they spend the whole day reading manuals and watching videos with department heads coming in and out on regularly scheduled times and checking off, okay, I did it, I did my job? You want to design an experience that makes that new hire feel valued, welcomed, and reflects your culture and values. The other key in culture-based engagement is to explain why. There's so many times, especially in our industry, where, there is no typical day. And so we have to ask someone to do something outside of their typical job description or change focus or change priorities. But often we're in such kind of either a crisis mode or stress that we're just telling them what to do. It's so important to kind of step back and explain, okay, so I really need you to do this. And I know you have a lot on your plate right now, but this is why. And that's going to really decrease your employee frustration, which helps with engagement. Something else that I saw in a community that made a significant impact was business cards. So this company gave everyone, no matter what level of employee, a set of business cards at time of hire. And they had their values printed on the back. I was amazed at how excited the staff was on their first day. From housekeeping, direct care, where everybody got this brand new pack of business cards, and they would give them out to families, and they would say, I'm taking care of your mom. If you have any questions, it empowered them. It made them feel valued, proud, and important. And it was like a $49 investment. So a lot of times you can do things that have a significant impact and kind of reinforce your culture that don't cost a lot. Another idea is Monday motivation. We all know Monday mornings can be tough. So post an inspiring quote at the time clock each Monday morning. Also, too, we have to do a better job of showing them the impact that they have every day. Make sure we're sharing the positive letters and feedback from residents and families. Share pictures of residents enjoying their day or an activity. They're doing that. They're the ones that are making that happen. So it's important that they feel valued and that they can understand the impact that they have on individuals every day. And last, for a best practice, is the honeymoon check. So are they still into you after 30 days, or do they want a divorce? The first 30 days are critical. So you want to make sure it's a positive experience. But you want to find out what is going to make it a positive experience. You always want to be getting that feedback. So, at the end of 30 days, take the time to ask your new hires a few questions. First of all, how did we compare to what we said we would be like? Is this everything we said it would be? Tell me what's going well in your first 30 days. Also, what employees have been helpful to you in the first 30 days? You're kind of trying to set the expectation for that kind of team involvement. Also, are there things you did at your previous job that might be helpful to us? And then continuing on with your recruitment efforts, you can ask, is there anyone you know who might be a valuable addition to our team? So it's really doesn't take a lot of time, but just to sit down with new hires after 30 days and kind of do that honeymoon check. So hopefully you're starting to think about how to integrate your culture and values into your recruiting and retention efforts. And again, you can download the best practices guide from your control panel in the handout section. And it goes into further detail about what was just previously discussed and also offers many more best practices in bringing your culture into recruitment and engagement efforts. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Tommy Kummer, who is the HR leader with Commonwealth Assisted Living. Tommy has a Doctor of Education and completed his dissertation on recruitment. He has worked in senior living for 5.5 years. The past 2.5, he's been the Vice President of Human Resources at Commonwealth. I've asked Tommy to come and share his success in aligning recruitment and engagement with the company's cultures and values. So please feel free to type in any questions you have in the questions pane of the control panel. And thank you, Tommy, for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate being able to speak briefly. Commonwealth Assisted Living's gone through a lot of those same challenges, and I would certainly say we're not perfect, and we'll probably never be a finished product, but we have implemented a lot of what you heard. Just a quick overview of where Commonwealth was. In 2013, the company wasn't really growing financially and with occupancy, and thankfully the folks the owner and founder of this organization recognized that, hey, something isn't right. And through a pretty lengthy process, we interviewed a third of our team and asked all of those team members, why do you love coming to work? What's not going well, and what will you tell me no one else will? And through that, we learned a little bit about what makes us Cal. That's what we call ourselves, Cal. And really to hone in on, hey, these are the aspects that aren't broken. Don't mess with those. But also to hone in on what isn't working. And what wasn't working, recruitment was too slow. We weren't hiring enough. We didn't know how to hire. Orientation was poor. Really no engagement. But also even just basic stuff. The vacuum example is beautiful. We had a similar one where an employee got up in front of the CEO and said, what we really need is just a few more towels, just real basics. What had happened with us is all of the decisions were being made at the home office in the center of the state. And we operated, at the time it was 20 communities, and we're all in Virginia. And it sounds great when you have 3 communities. Hey, the home office, corporate office will take care of that, we'll take care of that. It doesn't work so well when you get bigger. So we had to put more ownership into the communities, allow our executive directors to make more independent decisions and really change some thinking. From an engagement and recruitment standpoint, there were a lot of things that weren't going well with recruitment. One, we weren't very sophisticated. Everything was done either paper or in advertising in a newspaper or paper applications. You didn't really know what sources worked better than others. So through that process, it was a lot of just basic training on how to recruit, where to go to find people. To give you some perspective on just sheer numbers, we had 640 new hires in 2013. Last year we had over 1,000. Same store, same communities. So we've picked up the pace. Also, the orientation process was left a lot to be desired. You know, the first day looked very similar to what Andrea described. Here, watch some videos and complete all this paperwork. Oh, that sounds exciting. I can't wait to come back on day 2. So we changed that a little bit. We don't do any video. There's no videos on day 1 other than a short clip if Richard isn't there in person. Most often that's the case. But we have a video of Richard, our CEO and founder, talking about how he started the company. That's the only video they see on day 1. And we don't do paperwork. We actually get that to them ahead of time. They can bring in the paperwork. If they have questions, maybe they can stay after, touch base with the business office manager on a break. But it's too valuable time on day 1. Day 1 is all about meeting all the department heads, spending some time with them, learning why they love what they do, tell us about your favorite residents or favorite stories, eating a meal in the dining room with residents there. That has a big impact. But just try to make them feel excited and welcome. There will be time for those required aspects, the tasks that you have to complete, state-specific training or videos or other items. We just don't want it done on day 1. Day 1 is all about forming those relationships. Our new hire turnover, since we revamped recruitment and orientation, in the new hire turnover the first 90 days was 38% when I started. And I say really it was a team effort. This certainly isn't just me. It's now down to about 17-18%. Still, to me, too high, but we see a clear trend that it's going down. We're keeping more of the people we hire. The one thing I'll say when you go through any kind of culture audit or you recognize, gosh, we really need to change some things, is there will be friction. Not everyone's going to be on board with the change. My suggestion is to leverage metrics and data as much as you can. I know some companies, some communities have better access to that than others. Things I looked at were certainly new hire turnover, overall turnover, retention of your top talent. If you have a way to measure your high performers, maybe if a 1 through 5 scale, measure how well you keep the 4s and 5s. If you have a 1 through 9 scale, how well do you keep the 7s, 8s, and 9s? We hold our leaders accountable. Part of their bonuses for executive directors or regionals are based on that metric, and it's an all or none. If you go below a certain threshold, you get zip. We also put our values, our core values, on our reviews. So it's not just it's not what we do, but it's also how we do it. For example, if someone is a veteran employee who knows how to do everything, they're that person who can literally jump in and do every task. We've all worked with that person. But in this case, nobody can stand them. They're not a team player. They're always grouchy. Residents avoid them. With our company, they're not going to last, no matter how many skills they can perform, tasks they can perform. And that's our way of essentially putting our money where our mouth is. It matters how we do business. That's part of our culture. One other thing we've implemented is the interviewing with frontline. My suggestion is with executive directors is have one of your top talent, one of your best employees, give the person a quick tour and ask some questions that way. See how they interact when you run into a resident. Gives you a different perspective. It's also a way for someone who maybe isn't comfortable interviewing or not used to it to do something that's a little more natural to them, like show them around the community they work in. I love that thought, dig a well before you're thirsty. We say hire hard, live easy. Don't sacrifice the recruitment process. You will just create more work for yourself. There's so many things that can go wrong if you hire poorly. Not that it's an exact science, we all know that, but if you put consistency through it, ED being involved at least as a culture check, using your front line. Love the idea of inviting residents and family somehow. That's something we haven't really tried. I think something I've written down that I wouldn't mind trying. But really, it's all about asking those questions. What's going well? What's not going well? What can I do to help? How can I make your job easier? And ensuring your regionals, your senior leaders, and everyone else is asking those questions too. It's not rocket science. One other metric I look at is employee referrals, the volume. If I have a community who doesn't have any employee referrals, for the last 6 months, I think there's something wrong. We have a pretty good referral program. It's up to $800 if someone refers someone who stays at least a year. So I know it's a little competitive, but if nobody's referring anybody, you might have an issue in that community, something to dig into. Our NOI has gone up 62% since we implemented these things, really at the start of 2014. So there's real financial performance in driving down turnover and increasing engagement. Again, we're not a perfect solution. We have our issues like anyone else. We deal with those same industry-specific challenges, occupancy dips in the first quarter, and ED burnout and resident care director burnout. But little by little, we think we're massaging that nugget into a nice sphere. Happy to take field any questions about our experience.
Oh, that's great, Tommy. I can't believe your increase in NOI. I mean, that's a perfect example of just kind of really, focusing on the things that are going to have the biggest impact to the line staff and what it actually does to the overall NOI. So that's a great story. We have a few.
And there's so many more things we could. I mean, we could fill a whole day with all the little things we've tried too. There's a lot.
Have you tried things and they just didn't work? And
Sure. I mean, we're not afraid to give something a go. I mean, I've changed courses we've rolled out, or something sounds great in theory, but maybe is a little harder to implement. That orientation I described, I mean, it's gone through an evolution. That's another thing I think we've learned is don't be afraid to give something a try before you think it's perfect. Sometimes it's good to see it in action and then modify.
That's great. So we do have a couple of questions for you. So one of them, culture is such a squishy, and one of the questions is what are signs of having the right culture?
The researcher side of me is all about looking at multiple data points. We're a data junkie company, so I have the luxury of we have a lot of things at our disposal that I can look at fairly quickly. But what I would do if I was walking into something blind is look at everything from previous engagement surveys, new hire turnover, overall turnover, financial performance, and just try to connect all the dots. Same philosophy. If someone says, "Hey, everyone on my team, everyone in my community is a 9. Everyone's great." Hopefully that's the case. If that's the case, then turnover should be low, satisfaction should be high, financial support performance should be high. A lot of referrals, a lot of unpaid referrals from folks in the community. If all of those things are happening, then that could be very true. I think you just have to look at all the data points. But at the end of the day, it's also sitting in front of a group of employees, frontline employees, and asking them. Employees are candid. I mean, especially we could go through the generational aspects. Employees more and more, they have more access to information. They know when things aren't right, and if you give them a moment to tell you what's going right and wrong, they will tell you. And hopefully, if they don't, that's a bigger challenge.
So what part, one of the other questions is, what part does technology play?
For our experience, technology helped. On the recruitment side, I implemented an applicant tracking system, which it feels like when I talk to peers in senior living, it's about half and half. To me, I couldn't figure out what was going well from just straight advertising, our spending, without seeing which sources really worked, and also putting some transparency on what jobs we had open. I would get, oh, we need 3 caregivers. Okay, well, what does that mean? A 3 full-timer? Do you need a 1 part-timer, 2 full-timer? And also putting more ownership on the communities. Flipping that org chart or empowering the communities also puts a little bit more work in it, where they have to be responsible for posting their open jobs, staying on top of it, managing that process. Other ways technology helps is if you can develop systems, whether it's leveraging what you have now or seeking out solutions where you can see real-time data. It's very helpful for us. We have a system where I can see a rolling 12 months of turnover, and I can see trends. I can see new hire turnover by quarter. So if something is suddenly broken in a community or overall, you can see it through these metrics. You can usually paint a picture that way. It also helps when you're talking to members of the C-suite or your CFO when you have data behind you. The new hire turnover, I heard it at Shine, I heard it at Argentum, I've seen it on different publications. Average cost of turnover for 1 CNA is $5,000. So when you look at the overall churn of employees, multiply each one by $5,000, those are real dollars. That gets folks' attention. I think my impression, what I see is we probably, as an industry, spend more time on the front end, on the recruitment side, than we do on our current teams, and trying to save those folks who might be on the fence. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it could be a cost of living challenge. We may not be able to raise their pay up to the point where someone's offering it. But if someone just isn't feeling great about the company and nobody knows about it, that's real loss when they walk out.
Great. We have a couple of more questions. One was, how long did the process take before you started seeing some results?
I wish I could say it's overnight. It definitely there was some low hanging fruit for us, but we probably didn't truly see the financial results and the turnover results start to come in for over 6 months. And it's challenging. And then I would say on the flip side, while overall turnover, new hire turnover has gone down, just the nature of our business, we saw a bit of a spike in department head turnover because the communities were having to do a little bit more and handle a little bit more, but more empowered to do a little bit more, and that's starting to go down again. But just part of it is just the business model. We went from 40, 50 bed AL communities to adding memory care, not unlike probably a lot of folks on the phone, to 75, 85 beds, and suddenly there's a little bit more to do. An ED can't literally do it all. They have to depend on good department heads, and we've seen that position change a little bit. But I would say, you start to really see results in 6-9 months the way we did it.
Can't hear you, but so I think what you're asking for is, what is a good amount of time for onboarding? And it sounds like you have an all electronic process. Is it and I'm assuming it's filling out paperwork and just getting that person signed up. Tommy, what do you have the folks do it beforehand, right?
Yes, and it's the idea being most of the folks we hire have seen those forms before. There's some variation, but getting away from this, we got to walk everyone through every form because there's so much detail, and most people know how to fill them out. And if there's some mistakes, then we chase them down and get them rectified. But you don't want to waste I don't say waste, that's the wrong word, but there's so much valuable time in day one. You don't want to use it in paperwork. But I mean, as far as it's hard to answer the technology piece, I would leverage the systems you have, but don't sacrifice good face-to-face time with all of your department heads. And that's something else that we really believe in. If someone joins the care team, they shouldn't just interact with the care team. That ends up kind of happening throughout, as they get on board and start truly training on the floor. But they're joining XY community. They're joining Sunnyside Community, not the care team at Sunnyside Community. They're joining the best community in Norfolk, the best community in Virginia Beach. So they should know people in all the departments and see, and also sometimes they have questions from other departments that they need answered. And shocker, new hire is not always going to be comfortable going and finding the answer. But technology can be great. I wish we had an employee app or something where I could push notifications on pulse surveys or do a little bit more with technology. I think our industry is behind a little bit with technology. I still hear folks tell me, oh, not everyone has internet access or an email address, and I just don't buy it. I think everybody at this point just darn near has smartphones or access to them or some way that we need to embrace it, embrace social media, embrace all of those pieces. They're not going away. I think, funny enough, one of the things we've talked about is whether or not to get rid of the idea that people need to have their phones locked up or put away, and just treat them like adults. And if you have your phone, just you use it appropriately. Don't take pictures of residents and don't sacrifice care, but start moving towards treat everyone like they're an adult.
That's great. Leslie had one other question, I think, in reference to always be recruiting, and even if you have to find a great candidate, you bring them on PRN or per diem. And she asked, how many staff should you have as a backup? I've worked with some communities that will only hire people per diem until they kind of prove themselves. And there's some good and bad to that, but I think it's a balance. I think you always want to be recruiting. If you find that great candidate, you got to get them engaged as soon as you can, and also look at are there some staff that aren't engaged? We saw the statistic, 52% just show up. So it's that always be recruiting, but then it's always addressing, kind of the performance and behavior issues that are in your staff, so that you can have a more engaged staff. So hopefully that answers your question. And then someone indicated that they were unable to open the recruitment attachment. So we will be sending out COTS if you had any difficulty getting them. And we will also be sending out a recording of today's webinar as well in the next 24 to 48 hours. So we're all set for questions. Anything you want to add, Tommy? Or
just on that last question, I'd say one of the biggest hurdles we're still battling is I'm a fan of overscheduling. I got my start in retail, and that's just how you do it. And I don't see that as much. We tend to staff up to like exactly what we need, and then first time someone calls off, and it basically goes out the window. I pushed, and I think some of our communities have adopted this and maybe manage their financials a little bit better, where they're just more comfortable having more staff on schedule and just modifying it as needed. But I still see more of an old mentality of staff up to, or even recruit up to the very need you have, instead of overstaffing, overscheduling. I still see that as a weak point. It's a weak point with us. It's sometimes hard for me to convince the operators that it makes sense financially. But I mean, it's an industry prone to burnout, and having an extra body sometimes is more valuable than paying for an extra 4 or 5 hours. Also, going back to metrics, overtime is a metric to look at from a recruitment and engagement standpoint. If you got higher than normal overtime, you could have a recruitment issue, scheduling problem, engagement issues, management. I mean, that's a dead giveaway. You got some issues.
Great. Thank you so much, Tommy. It was so good you've actually kind of lived the experience, and I think your insight has been very valuable, and I so appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, absolutely. And I don't, the contact info is up there, but if anyone would like to get in touch with me one-on-one, I'm happy to chat.
Great, thank you. So on behalf of Senior Living Smart, we want to thank you for joining us today. We are continuing this month's theme on employee engagement, and our next webinar is going to be June 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it's Respect, Engage Your Team 1, 2, 3. So we hope you'll join us for that, and we will be again sending out a copy of the presentation as well as the handouts within the next 24 to 48 hours. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.